evening to everyone, wherever you may be. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us for today's webinar on modernizing your IBM Analytics. Today, we're going to be talking about the latest and greatest alternatives for Db2 Web Query that Fresh Solutions has recently brought to market and what that means for your organization. My name is Drew Monroe. I am the Senior Marketing Manager here at Fresh Solutions. I'll be moderating today's conversation. A little bit of housekeeping. The slides and the session recording will be emailed to you. So as soon as this webinar is over, you should be getting an email from GoToWebinar with a link to rewatch any of the highlights from today's conversation. Feel free to make this interactive, ask questions. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat panel and bubbling up any questions that you may have along the way to our presenters. As far as the agenda for today, we're going to talk a little bit about the backstory behind Db2 Web Query, the timeline, the short time in the market relatively, and what that means to you as an organization, the problem that could pose to organizations as that product officially leaves the market and reaches end of life, and what you need to know about that process. We'll talk a little bit about how to evaluate current alternatives in the marketplace from an unbiased perspective, a checklist, if you will, to see what you can embrace in your organization. And then we'll round out the conversation with the solution known as OmniAnalytics. We'll talk about what that is in a minute and get a live demo from Tobias on the latest solution that we've brought to market. And then I'll throw some resources and next steps in the chat window for you to explore more on your own and bring back that information to your organization. So with that, I'd love to start with some introductions. We'll kick it off with Steve and go down the line here. Steve?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Drew. So good evening, morning, afternoon, everybody. As you can tell from my accent, I hope I'm in the United Kingdom, so Great Britain, joining you in what is our evening. So delighted to be here. I'm the practice director at Fresh Europe. We principally provide services around across the whole really of the portfolio of Fresh products and services. My background goes back to RPG development to the mid-80s, and I've predominantly worked on IBM I all of my working career. So yeah, reasonable experience, I guess. A lot of track record of working with products like Db2 Web Query for I. So certainly have some opinions and some advice to offer there. I'd like to hand over to Tobias to introduce himself. So Tobias.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Tobias. I'm the general manager for Fresh Analytics. I've spent my whole career in data and analytics and AI, so 20 odd years. The picture on the screen, I think, was taken over a decade ago. Still much younger, but working with analytics. I've been in both the Microsoft space and the IBM space for large parts of my career. And what we'll show today is a bit of a sample of some of the things both that we can do with the IBM I connector and synchronizing, replicating IBM I data to a modern data platform, but also show some of the cool things that you unlock when you have the data in a modern data platform like that. IBM I Db2 is exceptionally good at transactions processing. It's unparalleled, and the backwards compatibility, all of that. But when it comes to modern data platforms, they have some quite interesting capabilities and features that are unlocked by having a replication of the data there. Thank you.
Well, Tobias, on the bright side, we have evidence here that you've aged incredibly well. So love that with the older picture. And my name's Steve Micah. We've tried to make this extra confusing for you all today with a Steve cast and a Steve Micah. He's the English one. I'm based in Portland, Oregon. I'm a data and AI lead for Fresh Analytics. I've spent the better half of the last decade working in the data and AI space across different platforms, Snowflake, IBM, Microsoft, AWS. really excited today to walk through DB2 Web Query and the kind of end of life and the opportunities that are arising from that. So thanks for joining us, and excited to get into this.
Great stuff. Thanks, guys. Yep, looking forward to presenting with the team here. So I thought I'd like to really start off with a bit of an explanation around how DB2 Web Query came into existence, and a little bit of an understanding about the journey that customers have experienced there with DB2 Web Query. So Drew, if we could go to the next slide. Yeah, so really, I guess the important thing to understand, and the reason you're obviously on this call today, is that you've got an interest in running some sort of analytics or reporting or intelligence and understanding of the data that you store. And part of that data is going to be on your DB2 for I, or dare I say AS400. I'll probably get shot for saying that, but some of you might think of it as the AS400 from the past. So this product's been around for some time, but is no longer with us. So let's try and understand exactly what's happened there. So DB2 Web Query was a third-party product licensed by IBM to solve a problem that IBM had, which was principally to understand how we were going to run analytics, reporting, business intelligence against our DB2 for I data set. Unfortunately, IBM and the provider of the product couldn't agree on the renewal terms, and actually the product was then removed from the marketplace very quickly. I think that caught all of us by surprise. I guess IBM knew what was happening, but certainly from a developer and support perspective, we suddenly found that DB2 Web Query for I was no longer available, leaving a bit of a gap in the sense that IBM had no obvious replacement for that product themselves, and leaving customers in a bit of a quandary, really. Your choices were to try and continue using DB2 Web Query for I, but that's a non-supported product. And how does that work if you are SOX compliant or Cyber Essentials compliant in the UK, for example? How can you continue using a product where the vendor no longer supports, provides patches, PTFs, etc., for that solution? So it leaves a massive gap in the marketplace. How does that affect you guys on this call? Well, I mean, the alternatives are not great, I guess, or until now. But maybe you've been looking at trying to export CSV files or spreadsheet data across via USB drives, or maybe you're emailing that data backwards and forwards, transferring it from one platform to another. And now all of these things are a massive risk. You know, you're opening up really a security nightmare there. Are you remembering to encrypt that data? Almost certainly not. So you've got unencrypted data, busy working its way through your network, maybe going off your domain and into other domains. So then you've got a risk for compliance. How are you ensuring, for example, that you're meeting GDPR regulations in the UK or Europe? So global data protection regulations are really important there to make sure that you are not transferring data that would identify a natural living person in open format. So this compliance issue, I think, is probably the #1 problem. Coupled with that, of course, is the fact that any of these alternatives are going to take more time. You're largely going to be relying on a manual process to transfer that data. That's time consuming, it's error prone. What does that lead to? The outcome there, you're wasting your staff's time, you're delaying business critical decisions because you don't have the data at your fingertips that you need to make those informed decisions that allow your business to operate effectively and competitively in your marketplace. So in terms of that timeline, I guess at the bottom of the slide here, just to understand what's happened. So we had general availability of DB2 Web Query for I and fairly well adopted across the marketplace, delivering good functionality. The latter versions from IBM were building more and more functionality, user dashboards, all the kind of things that for many years we didn't really have on an IBM I platform to understand and interrogate our data. And then literally we wake up the morning of April 28th, 23 and find that IBM have withdrawn the product from the market, and they run through a life cycle of support through to October the 31st, 2023. So we literally started that end of support cycle, and we've now reached the end of that in October 31st of 2026. So we're no longer able to really operate, or you shouldn't really be operating Db2 Web Query for I. So there's a gap, and we need to understand how we address that gap. So I guess if you're thinking, what do I do about this? Where do I go next? How do I find an alternative to Db2 Web Query for I that's been working really effectively for you in the past? Well, the kind of things that you need to look at really in an alternative is to, as we've highlighted here, first and foremost, I'd start with security, because that's probably the #1 thing to look for. So whatever we're going to do in terms of our data analytics, we need to know we've got security on the platform that we're operating that analytical function. We're all very comfortable and used to our IBM I security posture. It's arguably the most securable. A lot of people say the most secure platform, but I would suggest it's the most securable platform that's available today. So we want to keep that IBM security posture, which we felt comfortable with our Db2 Web Query for I solution, and being able to extend that into whatever alternative platform we're moving to. We want to move away from exporting data away from IBM I, because that's we want to understand how the risks are there when we operate in that way. So we want to govern that access. We want to control who has access to what information on our platform, and we want to tick the right boxes for our compliance. We want to make sure that when we do that audit for SOX or for Cyber Essentials and so on, that we can tick the box that says we're secure and compliant. Coupled with that security, of course, is ease of use. So it's comfortable to use a familiar interface. We're all very comfortable around various different platforms now, so we don't really want to learn something new. Let's try and avoid the need for training of our team, training of our key staff, and use a platform or an interface that we're already familiar with. Natural language queries. Great, we want to be able to ask the intelligence software that we're using, that analytics software, questions in natural language if we can. What does this financial report tell us? What is the difference between this balance sheet and that balance sheet? That kind of information. And we want to move away from green screens. There's a place for green screens, not just the matrix, but there's a place for them on warehouses and so on. But we want to move away to using that green screen functionality, very limited, 24 by 80 or 132 by 80 columns. We want to move away and have something much more intuitive and have the real estate on the screen to properly understand the data that's been presented to us. So how's that going to be presented? Well, modern analytics will be using tools like real-time dashboards. We want to be able to offer self-service for our business users, so the ability to create their own dashboards, their own filters, their own grouping, their own reporting. So empowering our users to be able to run the reports that they need to get the business information and understanding that they need. They're not all going to be sitting in front of a computer when they want to do that. So it'd be nice if that could run on a tablet or a mobile phone. So being able to operate that securely via VPN, but being able to run that functionality when they're away from the office. So looking at customer data in real time as they're about to go and visit that customer, for example. And AI, everybody wants AI for sure. So using AI to really deliver powerful insights into our data. So not just presenting the data in some kind of graphical form, but actually helping us to understand what the data means and overlaying that with those AI insights. Finding the right size solution is a challenge. So obviously the more basic tools, simplistic tools, are going to be simple to pick up and use, but are probably going to be a bit too limited and not deliver the functionality that you're looking for. Equally, there's some incredibly complicated solutions on the marketplace, and for complicated, I always read expensive. So the more complexity, generally, the more cost. So what I guess you're looking for is that mid-market sweet spot, something that's not too simplistic, it's got the functionality you're looking for, but won't cost so much that it's just not tenable for you to get the business funding in order to use that alternative product. Our platforms, very few of our customers now, I mean, I would probably say none of them have just an IBM I these days. Those days have gone. So they're going to have an IBM I, Db2 for I database. They're going to have, no doubt, some sort of flavor of SQL, so maybe Microsoft SQL. Almost certainly going to have some sort of CRM or maybe ERP solution. So those kind of products as well. And of course, cloud apps. So more and more we're using hybrid functionality with some on-premise solution and some cloud applications. So being able to access the data and understand the data across all of those platforms is really important. But somewhere in the mix there, we're going to have our single source of truth. We want to make sure that we're always referencing back to that system of record, transactional information that IBM I is really strong at delivering for us and giving us that single source of truth. And ultimately, we want to break down those silos. So we want to make sure that we can have, with the right guardrails, that cross-departmental reporting and analytics that we need to see, and not kind of have different teams having access to their own little proprietary data and not sharing those insights with other team members. And the last point on that slide, again, one of the most important ones really is we want something that's going to be supported and future-proof. We don't want to go back to where we've been with Db2 Web Query for I and find that the vendor pulls the plug on us with very little notice. And we're left, again, scrabbling around trying to find a solution that we can continue using and that's supported. So you really, when you're choosing an alternative, make sure you're finding something with that active vendor support and buy-in. You'll know that's happening because you'll see regular updates, they'll be delivering new functionality, and there'll be a very clear roadmap of that functionality they're going to make available in the next releases to you. So how would you go about evaluating that? Well, in the little slide here, we've had a go at doing that for you. We've had a review of some of the solutions that are out there. So you guys are probably, as we've shown there, and I'm sure you've come across these maps in shopping malls or shopping precincts or wherever you are. They're kind of, you are here, and there you are, guys, right in the middle there, the abandoned middle. I'm afraid you've all been left high and dry, not by us, I hasten to add, but by IBM. We're drawing Db2 Web Query for I. Somewhere on the left of that line, we could end up choosing a tool that's just too simple, doesn't really deliver the functionality we need, doesn't come with the governance and security guardrails that we're looking for. So we want to try and avoid going down in that direction too far. Equally, on the right-hand side of where we are is the complex solutions, those that are costing $100,000 and more, that take 6 to 12 months to implement, and all too often, by the time you've implemented them, kind of the business has struggled to cope in that time. You've ended up with shadow IT delivering non-strategic functions, non-strategic solutions in that time. So taking on too much, taking too long, costing too much. And we want to avoid that as well. So we've looked at a few alternatives here. We've looked at the Fortress SQL Showcase solution. And in our opinion, that's a great versatile product, very strong when the ETL and CDC functionality, but there's a steep learning curve to get into that solution, and it's higher cost. So very much on the right-hand side of our line here, so into the enterprise suite functionality. Even more so with IBM Cognos Analytics, arguably one of the most comprehensive business intelligence suites that you can buy, but it's the most expensive. Significant training, and you could easily be looking at a year or more before you can get the return that you're looking for on that investment. The other end of the scale, there's some user-friendly natural language solutions. Lancer BI is one of those. It's relatively new though, requires the installation of separate servers, which is a concept we've all been unused to with IBM I. We've used one server to deliver all the functionality. And that's probably bordering on the too simplistic version of the scale as well. So we're pleased to talk about our fresh OmniAnalytics, and Tobias will be showing you that shortly. But really, this is where we have our Power BI integration. We're utilizing pre-built models delivered on a modern cloud platform. And perhaps the only limitation there we can see is that it does require the Microsoft stack to move into. So, Drew, if we'd like to go to the next slide, and I will hand over to Steve if you'd like to take the reins from there, Steve.
Steve Cast, thank you very much, and really appreciate you laying the foundation here. I think you've really outlined well what the problem is. Now I want to get into what our solution is, which is our DB2 Web Query alternative called OmniAnalytics for IBM I. This is going to be built on Microsoft Fabric, and I know Fabric might be a relatively new term to a lot of folks. But before we get into that, I do want to talk a little bit about why IBM I continues to matter, why your DB2 ecosystem continues to matter. For decades, it's been your backbone. It's a secure, reliable, high-performance platform. It's going to run your core transactional workloads. It's not just a database. It's an application environment. Powers that real business logic every day. I know there's a lot of push in the space. There'll be a lot of vendors that are pushing you to migrate, go through these expensive processes. That's not our problem. That is not our recommendation. We do not believe that the challenge is with IBM I itself. It's how we extend the value into a modern analytics environment without disrupting that stability. And that's exactly what our DB2 Web Query alternative called OmniAnalytics for IBM I does. It seamlessly connects your IBM I ecosystem to the Microsoft Fabric world. So I really want to kind of break down what Fabric is. A lot of folks may not have heard of it. It really is the Microsoft's modern data platform that's built on top of Power BI. You're not familiar with Power BI, that's Microsoft's very long-running analytics platform. I think most would say it is the current gold standard for BI in 2025. It has really leapt past many of the competitors, your Tableaus out there, constantly being updated, constantly being expanded, integrated with AI capabilities. Really, there is no parallel in the BI space now. Fabric has been built on top of that. And what makes Fabric really stand out is the ability to bring together data from virtually any source, your on-prem SQL, your IBM I, AWS, Google Cloud, Oracle-based solutions, Snowflake. And this is rather unique in the space and rather frankly unique for Microsoft in really creating an open format, all built on a single unified data lake environment. The heart of that is called OneLake. It uses an open format called Delta Parquet that supports multiple compute engines. So if you're comfortable with SQL or Spark, you can use that all over the same data. What does this mean? It means less replication. It means fewer data silos and the agility to integrate where your data already lives without being locked into a single platform or forced into a massive movement project. These expensive migrations, 2025, I don't see them as valuable for a lot of organizations when there's solutions like this available. Steve mentioned that maybe the drawback of our solution is that you have to have the Microsoft stack. That doesn't mean you have to abandon the existing investments you've made in a suite of cloud or on-prem solutions. You simply can integrate them and leverage Fabric as your analytics engine if that's what you need. But beyond that connectivity, beyond the ability to integrate all these disparate data sources in a common format, within Fabric, there is a full suite of analytics capabilities. You're going to have data ingestion, preparation, and ETL, data engineering and warehouse, IoT analytics, real-time analytics, BI leveraging Power BI. It also, as everybody familiar with Microsoft, has Copilot pre-built. But in the Fabric space, that's very unique in that with these pre-built AI capabilities, you'll have a lot of different use cases that you can help enable the organization. You can help code, you can help clean data, and you can chat with your data on the back end. It truly is an all-in-one environment, and it's designed for speed to insight. Because that infrastructure is built on an open format and is pre-integrated, you're able to go from raw IBM I data to actionable dashboards much faster. This means that your existing IBM I investment remains the trusted foundation while you add a modern layer for analytics, integration, and growth. Also, in terms of flexibility, Stephen mentioned things like mobile. With that Power BI end, you have so many integrations available, but you also have the ability to put reporting to where the customer is, to where your end user is, to where your business units are. You can still leverage Excel connected to these. You can leverage AI capabilities. You can push reports to a variety of formats, mobile, web, etc. Really, it just allows a ton of flexibility in delivery. Also, licensing flexibility has been paramount and one of the cornerstones of the development of Fabric. This has long been an issue of Microsoft. Licensing and figuring out what you need to get stood up has always been a pretty complicated process. Fabric really does boil this down. Licensing is quite flexible. You can basically scale up and scale down with a SKU as needed. It allows for a really good ability to, kind of leverage more power when you need it, but also scale down if you're not necessarily requiring all the power. Everybody here, IBM I, paramount in terms of security, one of the most secure platforms you can find. Fabric extends that with one security. They're very easy to use security platform built for Fabric. This allows permissions basically extending from the column level to all the way to the report, so you can really restrict access based on roles and responsibilities. So what does this really mean for IBM I organizations? Fabric can be the bridge. It doesn't replace, it enhances. You can securely connect to Db2 data, keep your existing security posture, and start integrating with other critical systems. Easy integrations with your Oracle-based ERPs, Dynamics, SAP, Salesforce, a litany of on-prem and cloud-based solutions. There are a ton of pre-existing connectors and ETL that already exist. It's also quite seamless to build those out. So it just provides for a really next level degree of integration. First step here is bringing that IBM I data into the modern Microsoft ecosystem without a risky migration. So how does it all work? On the slide here, you'll see some technicals. I'm going to save the deep technicals for Tobias, but I do want to kind of give you a broad overview of what we've built here. So on the left side, number one, you'll see data is sourced directly from Db2. It's either going to be in table or journal format, and then securely moved into Fabric. Once it's in Fabric, it's organized into a pre-built lakehouse. That structure includes a raw layer for ingestion, a curated layer for transformation, and the modeled layer for reporting. If you're familiar with medallion architecture, it's the same logic: bronze, silver, gold. From there, OmniAnalytics for IBM I serves as your accelerator. It provides that pre-built lakehouse with the key facts, dimensions, and relationships already defined, along with a set of ready-to-use Power BI reports right out of the gate. This gives you immediate visibility into financials, operations, performance metrics, while also offering a flexible framework for your own custom reporting. Additionally, you'll be able to leverage Fabric's existing AI capabilities to query against Db2 data in common language. And this is really critical for folks looking to be able to leverage non-technical users, be able to deliver that data to the hands of folks who might not be super savvy, might not be able to want to dive into a report or an Excel workbook. Allows you to query in business language and ask questions of that Db2 data all seamlessly in the same platform. OmniAnalytics establishes a governed foundation that can grow your organization. It makes it easy to integrate your IBM I data with other critical business systems from ERP, CRM, supply chain, all within a unified environment. If you already have Power BI reporting, if you've already got a well-established analytics environment in the Microsoft space, OmniAnalytics IBM I will seamlessly connect into that ecosystem, helping you enrich your existing Power BI or Fabric models with trusted IBM I data. In short, OmniAnalytics for IBM I really gives customers a fast, scalable path to modern analytics. This turns your operational data into actionable insights, all while keeping the reliability and that investment you've made in IBM I over the last decades in the same platform. You can really leverage the best of both worlds. You don't have to risk an expensive and lengthy migration. You can bring what you've built into a modern analytics environment and leverage all the other cloud-based or on-prem apps and data sources that you've already got at your fingertips. So you've heard me bloviate on the potential, on the why. Now I want Tobias to show you how. So Tobias would love, and then before you give the demo, can you give a quick overview of how this connects in a little bit more technical terms?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you jump back to the architecture slide, Drew, please? Thank you so much. So as Steve mentioned briefly, we have two different methods of connecting to the data, and I wanted to speak a little bit to that. So the way that we do it is that there's going to be an x86 host that is deployed on your network that will facilitate extracting the data, converting it into a readable format in ASCII character sets, and compressing and encrypting it before it's being sent to the cloud. There's two different methods here. There's either a batch-based approach that utilizes the tables, or there's a real-time streaming approach that utilizes journals. The main difference between the two is that to do real-time streaming, it consumes a little bit more compute, so the cost to have the solution running is higher than the batch-based approach. So the batch-based approach, though, you only have data up to date, maybe once, twice, 5 times a day, something like that, but you can't expect that the data is replicated in real time. Other than that, the two approaches utilize very similar technology. When the data is then landed in the data lake, you'll see that we have first the raw layer. That's where you have the file names and the field names maintained that matches your IBM I source system. In enriched, you have the option to add the table and field descriptions if you have those applied and updated in your IBM I, so that the data can be more easily readable. And the curated layer allows us to also add generalizations, denormalizations, aggregations to the data as well. And then you can access all of that data through a SQL endpoint and attach both reports, dashboards, and large language models to the data. So that's part of what we're going to be looking at now. Anything else you want me to touch on, Steve, before I jump into the demo here?
I don't see any questions in chat. I think I'd love to just see you dive right into the demo and see what comes from that.
I love that. So I like to live dangerously. This is a live demo. And you should all be seeing my screen here. So this is the first layer of our replicated database, right? So we've set up the connector. We have it replicating into tables in this Backry environment. So as you can deduce from here, these are the file and field names as they are configured in the IBM I. So we can see our different tables. We can query those tables directly if we want to, and we can see the SQL responses here in the screen. This is accessed in the Power BI servers, and can be either accessed on the internet, or you can lock it down with private networking in the cloud. And it's of course behind multi-factor authentication, and you can also apply network security to it. Like I said, I love living dangerously, and my cluster is taking a rest for the minute. This side of it we'll get back to in a moment, so we can see us querying the raw data here. The next step is starting to create queries, save those queries. So what we're looking at here is an example where I have a notebook where I have a number of different queries that I often run on my data. I'm running this on the next layer of the data. So we've translated here. We've grabbed the descriptions from the fields and tables, applied them to the data so that it's easier to interact with by somebody who doesn't understand the IBM I database structure well. So I can run them individually. I can run all of them. I can change parameters for them, but this makes it easy to both write and execute these queries. It makes it easy to collaborate. I could have one of the Steves jump into this same notebook, and we can update it and see the changes update side by side. I can store this in Git repo so that I can have version control of these queries. I can, if somebody changed the query and it no longer works, I can roll back to a previous version. So there's a lot of power that comes with having these modern tools that comes with a modern data platform. So that's the first level of interaction with the data. The next level is that we can start building reports on the data in a modern reporting tool, right? So I can create balance sheets and P&Ls and similar reports, right, that have more interactivity than what you used to. You can do easy drill throughs down to the lowest grain of the data and really open this up to be a much more interactive experience with your data. When we're talking about interactive data, we will be talking about large language models, of course, today as well, right? So anything today, we got to touch on AI and how that interacts with the data. So here I have an accounts receivable data agent. So I can interact with that data. I can ask questions of my accounts receivable. So here I want to see the average age for open documents and day sales outstanding for closed documents for customers with the highest balance in US dollars. So it's a fairly complex question that I'm asking of the data, but it can string together the necessary queries. We can see some of the steps that we can see all of the steps that it completed. So it wrote this query where it will extract the total AR outstanding in US dollars. It used these sample queries to get to that result, right? So that's one example. I've got another one here where I want to see a list of customers with the highest outstanding balance. We can write queries like that, or write questions like that. What's important when we're talking about agentic interaction with data here is that what this does is it unlocks a large set of possible automated interactions with the data. So say, for example, that I want to have better monitoring of my customers' credit limits and their credit ratings, right? I can set up the agent so that every morning it'll do a poll of the data. It'll find any customers where their days sales outstanding has worsened by more than one standard deviation. Then for any customers where that is true, it'll go and it'll pull a new credit report on that customer, see if their credit rating has changed. It'll go to social media, see if there's any news about this customer on social media, and it'll go to public news sources as well, pull all of that together. It'll then create a credit overview, and for that customer, it'll send it to our accounts receivable and to our finance team and say, this customer, there's been a change in their days sales outstanding that's outside of a standard deviation. They typically have this happen to them once a year, and there's no other danger signals anywhere in the market. Whereas this other customer, they had the same change happen. This is not a pattern that we see with this customer. In the past, they've gotten a worse credit rating, and we see somebody tweeting about negatively about the company, something like that. And that means that suddenly we can be much more proactive about taking further action and reviewing where that customer stands and whether we need to adjust credit limits, whether we need to stop shipments, whether we need to start collections against them. And these are actions that typically only happen after month end, and it might be 1 or 2 months before we really start noticing that there's a problem with this customer. And using AI to automate those actions at a much earlier stage than what's really possible with humans is the type of thing that you can do with a modern data solution. That was my demo, and I see there's some questions popping in.
Yes. It seems like the demo gods were with you, Tobias. At least, maybe not the cluster waking up. The cluster is still asleep. But yeah, there is a question in the chat about matching the IBMI table name, the 8 characters. Are you able to address that question?
Let me see. Right. So that's the way that we do that, right? We can extract the table descriptions and the field descriptions and apply that to the table. That is going to be right for some customers, we find, and other customers prefer to retain the actual 8-character name that it has in the physical file, but we get that through the metadata in the IBMI from the system tables there. We get both the field and the table descriptions and apply them to the 8-character names there. Another thing that we see is there are some customers that prefer to do, if their IBMI table and field descriptions aren't accurate, they prefer to do a manual mapping where they supply different descriptions outside of it. So they have a mapping table that gives you that crosswalk, but it's really up to how your database is configured and how you want to interact with the data. You can just leave the 8-character names in place if you prefer.
In my experience, Tobias, the technical team, programmers, data analysts, those sort of people, I guess, are probably going to know those 8-character. They'll know CUFXPC is the customer fixed rate percentage because they've been using the database for a long time. But users from the finance team, HR team, purchasing team, those kind of guys are probably not going to know those 8-character references. So they're going to want the long name, the English description. So the fact that we can do both is a real bonus.
I think it's important to also emphasize this is not a product that we just drop on your lap. There's a lot of customization. There's a lot of collaboration. This isn't just an out-of-box solution. This is designed to be a true partnership and to really be kind of a starting point where you get to that value much, much quicker by leveraging OmniAnalytics. Tobias, Jasmine asked, what's the benefit of using OmniAnalytics over ODBC?
Yeah, it's a great question as well, right? Because as you can see, we're adding complexity to the solution, right? So this is not necessarily the right solution for everybody. If all you need to do is query the DB2 database, DB2 might be a good fit for you. But as we saw, there's quite a lot of other capabilities that you unlock, such as reg reporting and dashboarding, such as building AI agents that can work directly with the data. Or not AI agents that can work directly with the data. Another thing is most of our customers don't just have IBMI. They also have data sitting in Salesforce or in HubSpot or in any number of other systems. Some of them might have a SQL database that they want to integrate. So what this allows us to do is bring all of that data into a single place, and you can query that data and build a report or build a query that has results both from NetSuite, from IBMI, from Salesforce, and so on and so forth. So it's process that you open up where you can start building a full modern data warehouse from here. Next question, George is asking, there are a lot of assets already built into Db2 Web Query, like reports, queries, etc. How does this solution facilitate the migration of those Db2 Web Query assets to be functional in this solution? So we have the queries, we can do the most with the queries, right? So we can convert all of the queries to a SQL format, and then we can load them into a notebook in a similar way as what I showed in the beginning of the demo, right? For the reports, we have less automation around it. There's going to be more of a manual assessment and more manual work with that. We don't have a full automated solution for that, but in order to really answer it, we'd be happy to do a session with you and look at what is your footprint today and what's the best way to convert that.
Just to add to that, Tobias, the limitations with Db2 Web Query for I, where you have very few templates for graphical representation of the data. So if you did import those, you'd be very much restricting the capabilities of the M platform by retrofitting what you could do in Db2 Web Query for I. So you're almost certainly going to want to do some design work and rethinking as you move the data across.
Yep. George has another question. We have multiple clients with proprietary data. How does this solution ensure that each client has access only to their own data? That would be another thing where we'll replicate all of the data across, and then we'll have to set up role level security on the data platform again. And there's not a direct way to transfer that. We'd have to pull the data from that shows which users have access to which areas of the data and reapply those rules. So it's fully supported, but there's not an automated migration of the role level security on the data. George is also asking, what's the cost structure of this solution? How does it compare to that of Db2 Web Query? Steve, Cass, are you able to address? I'm not familiar with the Db2 Web Query cost.
So Db2 Web Query for I had a license cost associated with it from IBM that was based on the processor group that you were using. And it would vary, obviously, very much depending upon the how powerful your machine was, really determined the cost. We have a slightly different cost model, obviously.
Right. So the cost model here is going to be based on how frequently that you want to migrate or that you want to replicate your data. Real-time streaming is going to be more expensive. Massive volumes of data, if you have billions of records, that's going to be more expensive. I've seen customers run these solutions starting from and how many users that you want connected to it is also an impact. I've seen customers run this starting at about $1,000 a month, somewhere around that. But if large enterprise clients with thousands of users and billions of records, it can be quite a bit more than that. And the resources that are needed to implement, we typically build out an implementation plan for this with the customer, where our preference is that we deploy the initial solution, so that x86 box on your network, as well as the cloud resources, and the initial setup of the replication it can typically be completed as quick as you can provide access. That's usually most of the issue, right? Is getting users, getting access to the systems, the VPN, and so on. But the initial replication is very quick. then the question is, how big of a solution is it? How, if you have 10,000 queries that need to be migrated and tested, then there's some significant time, could be weeks or more, to do a complete testing of all of that. We usually work with the customer client that we're working with to find out how much of it do they want to take on, and we can train them to take on as much of it as they want, or we can take it on for them. But it's something that we need a little bit more detail about the size of the environment and so on to be able to give a good answer to that.
Lots of good questions. Thanks, Tobias. If you all have any other questions, we've got a few minutes left here. We are reaching the top of the hour. So if you have any last minute questions, drop those into the chat. In the meantime, talk about some resources and next steps. We have a number of opportunities to learn more about what you saw today. I'll drop the links in the chat here. So check the chat window for a blog. For the solution brief, you can download that directly. No form to fill out. Just go download that PDF that summarizes what we have talked about today. There is also a relative case study for a customer who has implemented OmniAnalytics. They were a Microsoft ERP with part of their solutions that they migrated. So go check out that case study. Lastly, if you'd like to see more of details of what Tobias shared today, click that link to contact us, schedule a one-on-one demo, and we'd be more than happy to walk you through more of the details and address more of those questions. So let me check the chat one more time. Doesn't look like we have any other questions. So with that, Steve, and Tobias, thank you so much for joining us today, for talking through today's topic. If you'd like to learn more about us and see more information like this, be sure to follow us on LinkedIn and X, formerly known as Twitter, for IBMI Insights, more webinars like this, content, resources, and much, much more. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Drew. Thanks all for joining.
All right. Bye, everyone.